Hello and welcome to the December issue of the Anger Cure. With the festive season rapidly approaching, Emily and I thought it would be really great to start to explore anger in the family and within your relationships. So this month we're going to begin to look at ideas around how family life can bring out the worst of our anger, how being with our loved ones can both be a source of great joy, but a source of vulnerability that risks those hot buttons that cause our anger and rage to get pushed more often than they would with other people. Later in the month, we're going to start to look at the Christmas survival guide, how to survive the festive period. We're going to start this week with setting limits on conflict. And yes, you heard me right. This isn't about avoiding conflict, but about setting some acceptable limits on the way that we fight with each other. So why do I say that? The reality is that every couple is made up of two individuals, and those individuals bring with them their own history, their own baggage, and their own way of seeing the world. And when those two things intertwine, it's inevitable that there will be disagreement. Now, the bigger the disagreements, the more important the subjects. And of course, relationships can have some big subjects: money, how to raise the kids, where to live, how to split up those chores. Then the likelihood is really inevitable that those disagreements will turn into conflict occasionally. So what marks out successful couples from the couples that I see in my therapy room is not that they never fight, it's actually that they use those fights to bring about positive outcomes within the relationship. So first of all, they actually use the conflict as an opportunity to problem solve. By problem solving, you begin to move the relation on and end the antagonism. But really more importantly, really successful couples can use difference and conflict within the relationship as a way to actually build better understanding about your loved one. And actually this develops greater intimacy and allows for you to form a really strong foundation within your relationship that acts as the platform upon which the rest of your life can be built. So what we're going to do this week is actually build a very, very simple contract that builds some limits on the more unacceptable behaviours that might happen when we fight, particularly around things like contempt. So we're going to start by asking 4 very simple questions. What is it acceptable for me to say or do when we fight? What is it not acceptable for me to say and do when we fight? What is it acceptable for you to say and do when we fight? And what is it not acceptable for you to say and do when we fight? So let me start with some very clear boundaries. Violence and aggression are never okay. And if your relationship has already deteriorated to this level, then I suggest you go and get some help from a professional as soon as possible. But beyond that, then I think it's really up to the couple to set those individual limits, because what is acceptable for one person and for one couple is unacceptable for another. So really think about this very clearly. Think about the words you use, but also the tone of voice, the gestures and the behaviours that go with that. Print off the worksheet that comes along with this video and make a contract. Stick to it and agree a penalty if you break it. Perhaps you'll do some chores that you particularly don't like to do, or you'll do a favour for your partner. So some of the things that you might want to think about within this contract are shouting, swearing and gestures like eye rolling. Now I'll be honest, I swear like a trooper. And actually my partner's fine with it. So when we argue, there may be a lot of swearing, and we're both fine with that. For another couple, or maybe just for one half of the couple, swearing would be seen as really unacceptable and really contemptuous. So perhaps that's a red line that some people would want to draw. What about shouting? Many couples I know can have a real ding-dong battle. But for my wife, shouting is something she doesn't really handle. So that's part of our agreement, that I keep my voice down however passionate or irate I am. Eye rolling and facial gestures come up really, really commonly as something which people see as a sign of disrespect or contempt. So think about all of these things when you're putting your contract together. I hope you find this exercise really, really useful. In truth, this is just a starting point to making your conflicts acceptable. Once you have acceptable and manageable conflict, we can start to move to the next stage of actually moving you towards problem solving and building intimacy. In next week's video, I'm going to look at how we can set up some fair fighting roles that will actually help us move towards that journey of problem solving. But for now, let's start by setting some limits around our conflict. This becomes a self-container in which we can disagree, knowing that things won't get too far out of hand. Emily and I would love to know what your contract looks like, so maybe post some of this in our Facebook group, and we'll get back to you and talk about it. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how this goes and to helping you guys have a really great festive period. But for now, that's me out, and I will speak to you next week. Bye.